The fourth quarter was a wild ride for our favorite dividend growth ETFs. DGRO came up with a timely 18% quarter-over-quarter increase to keep its dividend growth streak alive. Meanwhile, FDVV had a rough one. It dropped 18% compared to the same quarter last year. And just like that, it coughed up the dividend crown to our old friend, SCHD. In today's video, we're breaking down all the juicy dividend metrics to see who deserves that top spot heading into 2026. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Jeff Teeples, and here we aim to grow your wealth with simple, time-tested solutions. If you enjoy this content, do me a huge favor. Tap that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and consider joining the channel membership. Your support keeps this section short and sweet. You know what time it is. Let's grow. Quarter 4 Dividend Scorecard. I've always enjoyed dividend growth investing, and keeping up with the trends each quarter is important to me. And that's why I track my favorite dividend growth ETFs right here every 3 months. We started this series with 4 longtime staples: SCHD, DGRO, VIG, and VYM. And after FDVV came out swinging earlier this year, it officially joined the mix last quarter, making this a 5 ETF showdown. And when it comes to dividend ETFs, I care about 3 core factors: the dividend yield, the dividend growth rate, and of course, like any investment, the long-term total return. But in this series, we give the biggest weight to the dividend growth, because that's what compounds your cash flow over the long haul. SCHD dominated this scorecard for a long time until FDVV snuck in there and took the crown last quarter. But this quarter, it was a tight race with some major reversals thrown in there. Let's break down the numbers and determine who really deserves the top spot in quarter 4 of 2025. We're going to start out here on my ETF dividend growth history spreadsheet. And this one's out there for anyone to check out for free. Link in the description below. It's in Excel. And since we're talking about the year-end quarter 4 dividend, we now officially have another full year of dividend data for each of our tickers. So I'm actually going to start down here on this table, yearly dividend growth stats. And this one here shows how many years in a row the dividend has increased in this column. And then this column shows how many total years the fund has paid a dividend. And then the misses is how many years it failed to grow its dividend. And you can see by percentage. So SCHD and DGRO have been around for 14 and 11 years respectively. And you can see they have a 100% dividend growth rate, which means they have never failed to pay more dividends than they did the year before in the fund's history. DGRO has been around for 11 years and increased 11 in a row. SCHD is up to 14 years and 14 years in a row. And you can see VYM and VIG actually have been around for 19 years, and they have failed to increase their dividends twice in their history. So they have an 89% chance of paying you more that year than they did the year before, which is pretty darn good. And VYM actually has the better streak of 15 years to VIG's 12 years right now. And then FDVV, it's fairly tech heavy, and the total returns enamored me a little and made me add it to this series. It's good, it's quality, and it has a solid yield, and we'll get into all that. But it clearly is not as good or consistent at growing dividends. It has a 78% chance of paying you more in the current year than it did the year before. It has 2 misses in its short 9 years. And I will point out that each of the 5 funds did increase their dividends this year. So FDVV has 1 year in a row, and then double digits for all these guys. Now let's cover the primary table here. And you can see that we have 2025 quarter 4 selected. This is dynamic, so you can change these inputs and it will pull the stats of the dividends at the time of whatever your input is here in the yellow. But for quarter 4 of 2025, we'll start here with yield. This is one of our big 3 stats. We had yield, dividend growth, and total return. So you can see the yield is dominated by SCHD. I'm actually going to sort these as we go here, at 3.77%, and then FDVV has a very respectable 2.9%. VYM comes in at 2.4%, and DGRO is right there at 2.1%, and then VIG's always been more of a growth-oriented fund at 1.6. They're all ahead of the market, which is around 1.1 right now, VU. And now we're ready for a wild metric, the quarter over quarter. You can see that DGRO just exploded compared to quarter 4 last year, beating it by 18%. And then SCHD had a solid 5% growth. VIG and VYM were about flat quarter over quarter. And again, this is just fourth quarter this year versus fourth quarter last year. And then FDVV, being the least consistent, pretty hands down on its dividend history compared to these other 4, was down 18% compared to fourth quarter of last year. Now, it's funny because on the 1-year return, you still have it growing at 11% on the trailing 12 months, the last 1 year. So full 25 cash received versus full year 24 cash. SCHD was right there at a consistent 5.4. VIG's on its heels at 5.3. And then DGRO is also around 5. VYM struggled at 0.18%. So it almost lost this 15-year streak. It's actually 2 years in a row that it just limped over the growth finish line. So this is very dicey right here compared to the other ones. But growth is growth. You definitely lost to inflation though. And now we're going to get out to the last 3 years. And things will get a little more consistent as we get longer and longer durations in question. Now, in the last 3 years, you can see FDVV is still the champion, even though it's all over the map at 8.4%. DGRO at 7.5% to SCHD's 7%. And then VIG's there at 6%, and VYM at a very disappointing, around inflation, maybe even a little lower, 2.49%. Now, in the last 5 years, FDVV is still reigning supreme here at 9.8. SCHD and VIG are actually weirdly tied at 9.15. DGRO at a very solid 7% annual growth rate. And VYM at a disappointing 3.8. Now, 10 years, this is my favorite, 10 and beyond, because this is what things really grow over long periods of time when you zoom out, when you're chilling and compounding and just letting it do its work. SCHD is at 10.6, which is incredible. DGRO is at a very impressive 8.6%. Then you have VIG at 7. FDVV, this is an 8-year CAGR. It doesn't have the full 10-year look back. This is as many full years as we have. Is at a okay 6%. And then VYM is right there at 5. So when you zoom out, VYM looks a little nicer on the growth rate. Now for this average CAGR, we'll sort by this. What I do here is I average the 1, 3, 5, and 10 year. I explain this every quarter. I don't add in the quarter over quarter to the average because it's just one small data point. It's not a full year or multiple years, and it can really skew the data. So just looking at the 1, 3, 5, and 10, the highest average CAGR is still FDVV at 8.87, SCHD at 8. Is second place, DGRO at 7%, and basically tied with VIG there at 7, with the average CAGR, is in third and fourth, and then VYM is at a pretty sad 2.87% dividend growth rate on average. And now this is how I declare a champion, and oh baby, it was close. So dividend power is just that average CAGR, but you got to give yourself credit for the yield as well. So yield plus average CAGR. And really, I'm kind of discounting yield a little bit. It may be more valuable depending where you are in your investing journey, but SCHD squeaked out a win at 11.81 versus FDVV's 11.75. DGRO at a very solid 9 to VIG's 8.5, and then VYM is at 5.3. So SCHD took the win in quarter 4 by just a hair, and it's won every single quarter except for quarter 3 this year. And I want to touch real quick on FDVV, which has had incredible total returns, because we'll get into that soon. It's very tech heavy at 26%. But when I say it's inconsistent on the dividends, you might say, well, Jeff, it still has really high CAGRs. But we have to remember that that data can quickly change depending on the specific quarters that roll into the data set. And just as an example, and SCHD is the best at this, but I feel like I always use it. So let's just pull up DGRO instead. When we just glance at DGRO's growth. So this right here is the data table that's rolling into that tab we were just looking at of the summary. And you can see that the 1-year CAGR right here, the bold ones are at a year end. So with DGRO, you're always looking at solid growth. 4 is a little lower, but it's comfortable, right? 5, 4, you go up to 3, and then it didn't have enough data at that point. So that looks very solid. You see a lot of positive numbers. 3-year CAGR, same. Very positive numbers and very consistent. And SCHD is similar. When you go to FDVV, like this is the 8-year CAGR, you have to have the full look back. So for example, this is looking at the most recent 4 quarters versus 8 years ago, those same quarters. We don't have the 10-year look back yet for FDVV. But if you look at the 1 year, you're at positive here, but then -8, and then big positive 24, huge 18, a very solid 6, but then you're at -20. And when you look a year back, so these are all over the map. And even the 3 years, no growth. Over 3 years, no growth, no growth. And then it explodes. So sometimes it looks great. Sometimes it looks terrible depending on the snapshot in time. Like if we were doing this video right now at the end of 2020, I would say it snapped its streak and it paid 20% fewer dollars than the year before did. Ouch is all I can say. And look at these quarter over quarters, -25, -27. So it's not me just randomly hating. It objectively is all over the map. Now I will say, especially this last quarter, but even this quarter in question here, it's looking pretty good. So we're in a pretty nice little sweet spot era for it. But you know, if you're making videos here or in the future, you just never know. So I personally feel comfortable with the DGROs and the SCHD, which is the most consistent as we do this exercise. So with that said, we've covered the yield, one of 3 metrics. We've covered the dividend growth here, and that's 2 of our 3, but we gotta at least glance at long-term total returns. Okay, so we're out and Seeking Alpha, the best platform for stock and ETF research. I genuinely believe that by a mile. And what I've started with here is the 10-year total return, so dividend included chart of our 5 ETFs. And you'll notice that FDVV has not been around 10 years, so it's at a little bit of a disadvantage here. And don't worry, we'll get into that. But on the 10-year look back, you have VIG at 264, FDVV for what's there at 218, very solid, DGRO at 265, so VIG got outperformed by its little bro DGRO by 1%. And these ones are feisty and they're always battling each other. SCHD at a solid 216%, slightly outperformed VYM at 212. But what I'm going to do now is put in 9/12/2016 to make it a fair fight for FDVV's case. Okay, here we are. And you can see that we're pulling from 9/15/2016 for each of the holdings. That gets FDVV the full time duration. And I've slightly reordered these for my OCD. I put them in order of the winners, but you have VIG with the most total returns in that 8 years in change at 219.5. DGRO, of course, as always, right there at 218. And you know, I gotta say, I prefer DGRO for its slightly more consistent dividend growth and higher yield because they always basically tie in total return. So just give me the better dividend stats. But they're both great. And then FDVV is right behind those 2 big dogs at 216%, well ahead of the more value plays. We all know about the tech growth boom, so who knows what happens in the future, of SCHD at 171.5 and VYM at a very nice 169.9. And just remember that one quarter won't make or break an ETF. It's all about finding that balance and building a portfolio that works for your long-term goals. Closing thoughts. All 5 of these ETFs can absolutely play a key role in a smart, long-term portfolio. But I personally put a premium on dividend growth consistency. And in that category, SCHD and DGRO have been in a league of their own. In my portfolio, I already have plenty of tech growth through funds like VGT, QQQM, and VU. So SCHD has become the perfect stabilizer, lower overlap, more value tilt, and a dividend that I can count on year after year. If you want a core that behaves more like VU in and of itself, then something like DGRO, VIG, or FDVV can help you capture that quality growth. And then VYM is just a stable all-arounder. The right answer for you will depend on your portfolio construction, not a single quarter victory on a YouTube video. The real key, as always, is this. Stick to your system through the good quarters and the frustrating ones. Jumping in and out based on emotion is how you interrupt compounding. It's simple, but not always easy. If you can stay disciplined, you will win big long term. And speaking of long-term winners, a huge shout out to you 31 awesome channel members. And we didn't have any new members this week, but that's okay because I just wanted to remind each and every one of you that you are making this possible and you are appreciated. Seriously, you guys are the best. And a quick shout out to my two favorite investing tools, Snowball Analytics and Seeking Alpha, pinned in the comment below if you want to try them for free. And if you love them, you can save yourself some money. That's priority number 1, while supporting this small channel as priority number 2. And by the way, thank you for all of those that have used my links. They really are about 25 to 30% of my pretty low income, and it makes a big difference. So thank you, thank you. And finally, check out one of these 2 videos to continue down your path towards financial freedom. Remember, money is overrated. Freedom is not. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.